around the house in part 31 in my series of loft conversion videos. Today we'll be running the cables through the joists for the sockets and the lighting. I'll be wiring up some junction boxes, finishing off some insulation, and I'll show you a few details along the way. All I've got to do is drill a few holes today to run a few cables through the joists. Now there are rules about where you can drill these holes and how big the holes can be. Now I've measured the distance on my joists, so I've drawn a line across them all, exactly where I'm going to drill them to make sure that they're not altering the structural integrity of the joist. But added to that, the hole I'm doing is way smaller than the hole I'm actually allowed to do anyway. So I'm only going to be running two cables through, a 1.5mm and a 2.5mm cable. Should be going right round the loft. One for sockets, one is just a radial circuit straight to a light. So that's it. So to be honest with you, the hole I'm doing is going to cause no problems whatsoever. So I've drilled all those holes now. My way of thinking with this is you've got insulation in the floor. Now you've got to be careful about wrapping cables in insulation because obviously the cables can get hot. So it's how do you do it, because they've got to go somewhere, so they're either below or they're on top. So what I thought was I got a little air gap. Where I've done the wire mesh, there's an air gap of about 1 inch or 2 below all the insulation. So I've left all the existing cables for the lighting downstairs in that section of the ceiling. That way it's not wrapped in the insulation. Yes, it's still going to get warm because it's insulated. But I mean lighting cables with LED lights, because that's what I got downstairs, it's not going to be drawing much power. Those cables are never going to get particularly hot. So I'm happy with that down there. Then is what I'm thinking is, for this floor, I'd like everything in here to be accessible from up above. So, like I showed you previously, I've done a junction box. I'll just show you that over there now. You can see I've put all those Wago boxes on the wall. Now each one of those is a junction box for the lighting. For those of you that have seen some of my other videos, each one of those basically is the equivalent of an old-fashioned ceiling rose. So all the wiring for the switch and whatnot is inside there, and then basically the feed is just going to go straight to all the lights and to the cables from those boxes. So again, like I was just explaining, if I've got any issues with the wiring, in theory, as long as the cables are all intact, the only connections are available through there. So whilst I don't actually have to do this, you know, if you're using what they call maintenance-free junction boxes, like those Wago ones with the correct connectors, then you can actually leave them in the ceiling. But personally, I thought, because I've got the stud timber, that kind of wall, it's not a solid wall, it's a perfect opportunity to put a little front over that, like a little cupboard, and then in the future, if there's any issues or I want to add any lighting or anything, that's my access point. I can take it off, it's all there, nice and simple in one unit. The only reason I'm doing this is because it's my house and I want everything accessible. I've done it in the rest of the house. Every junction box I got on the lighting, you can pull through the ceiling, so you've got access to it. And I've made sure that I've got no junction boxes in the ceiling. And whilst you can use the maintenance-free junction boxes within the joists and whatever, it's just a bit awkward. If something does go wrong or you want to get into it, it means tearing up the floors and remembering where it all is. So the way I've tried to do it is that within my ceilings and my floors, all I've got is cable, and then all junction boxes can either be accessed by pulling them through, or in this case I've got them in the wall and I can pull a door off the front and I've got access to every lighting circuit. Just note, before I get any comments below, I'm not an electrician. I'm doing this myself. I've got a friend who's an electrician. He always checks my wiring visually, and then he'll come back and test it and inspect it. I always take photos. Obviously I'm filming it. He can look at anything he wants if he's unsure. I know where all the runs are. I draw myself a few diagrams and that kind of thing. So he will come at the end of it, and as part of the building regs, I'm going to get him to come out. He's going to sign it off, certify the electrics if it's all hunky-dory, and then I can submit that to building control as part of the building notice I gave for the whole loft. The other thing I just wanted to note was where I drill these holes through the joists. Again, you don't have to do this, but it's good practice. Within the zone that I'm allowed to drill in, I've actually drilled, say, here, then here, then here, and by doing that it just means that I've staggered the holes like that as I go along, and that way it just means that all your joists don't have a continuous row of holes, which obviously, if there is a weak point, they're all in line with one another. So it's good practice sometimes just to stagger them. Now I appreciate if you're doing plumbing pipe work, then it's got to be in a straight line, but if you're doing cables, just use the biggest hole that you need to use. There's no point making it any bigger. Like this one, I didn't use a very big hole at all, only enough to get my one cable through. So it's well within the size of the hole that I can use. All the wiring for the loft I'm going to do on top of the insulation. So where I've drilled these holes, again it makes it tricky because you've got all these rules about where you can place your holes. but really you can only place them somewhere in the middle section, so it's going to pop out in the middle of the insulation. But what I'm going to do then, basically bring it up over the insulation, back down through the joist, back up and over, and that way at least it's not buried within the insulation, there's not insulation going over it. So that's my way of thinking anyway. But unfortunately, if you actually read through the electrical regulations, there's not a lot of account taken for these sort of things. These days, modern builds, everything's wedged with insulation, and yet you've got to somewhere get your cables in, get your pipe work, everything's meant to be insulated, but then everything's meant to have a gap around it for, say, overheating, that kind of thing. It's very tricky, and there's these little grey areas where you've got to use a bit of common sense, and really the only way to do it is by using the calculation tables. Make sure that the size of the cable you're using is correct for the loads that you're going to be putting on the cable, making sure that your fuse is correct and whatever. But realistically, your average sort of amateur DIYer, you shouldn't really be worrying about this, just get an electrician in anyway. You can see just by here on the original socket is what I'd done is taken a fuse spur to here, and then I was using this to control the light in the loft off the ring final circuit, and what I'll do is do this again inside the cupboard spaces. So rather than have things off the lighting circuit where we've got sockets on the wall, I can just pop one of these off the side, and it means when I want to go in the cupboard I can just push the switch just next to the closest socket and just turn some sort of strip light on in the cupboard. I'll try and show you how to do this in more detail in another video. That's it for the mesh and the insulation now until the stairs are in. I'll just give you a quick look around now. I've just finished off all the insulation there. It does go underneath this board as well, and the edge of that board is exactly where this wall's going to go, I've been talking about in previous videos. So as you go up, that wall is going to sort of hit, if we go by here, just this side of the ridge of the roof. Then we're going to go sockets, you know, probably in the corners, one there, maybe one there, one there. Loads of sockets, get them all around the place, because you never know how you're going to lay the room out, and if you don't put enough in, you'll always regret it later on when you think, right, I want to plug something in there, didn't put a socket there. So get those sockets in, it's my advice. Now this little square you can see there, stairs will be going round by there and then down there in that sort of L shape, and then we're going to be supporting a few joists across there. So this will be, although the ceiling's a bit low under there, this will just be a nice little space, an additional bit of floor space. So your stairs will come up and you'll have a bit of space that side, you'll have a bit of space that side, obviously more this side. You can put a desk or something down there. I'll leave a light by there and I'll go and stand down the other end now. If I walk down here and I'll just turn around, feel like that. There we go, you can see all at the other end. So it's nice and clean and tidy now. I got the Henry Hoover out, did all the floor, nice and clean before I laid this insulation down. So I know I haven't got bits of crap, you know, nails, bits of wire, bits of insulation or foam insulation, you know, all underneath. It's all nice and clean. Everything was all vacuumed out, or hoovered out as I like to say, underneath before putting that down. So yeah, everything's hunky-dory now. So I'm back, it's a new day, time to feed these cables through the holes in the joists. So I got my makeshift device here, which is a broom, a little step ladder and a bucket to prop the other end, and now I can roll the cable out, and then I'm just going to start running it through the holes at that side of the loft and make my way back along there and back down this side, obviously raising it up where I want the sockets. So over here we've got the socket. Now that was the socket I was using previously. I disconnected all the power, took this off, and that socket was on the end of these two cables, and these two cables were part of the downstairs final ring circuit. I say downstairs, the upstairs, but down below us. And these both came up because I put one socket on the ring when I renovated the house originally up in the loft, just in case I did something like this. Anyway, so from there we got one cable goes up to that socket, so that's the power feeding the socket, and from that socket the cable's going down through the joist and basically all the way around the loft. And as we go around, I've got a cable there, a cable over there, we got one in the corner there and one just by there, you can see, and those are for where I want all the sockets. I haven't cut them for now, I just looped it up and back down, so the power's continuous for now. I can cut those at a later date. Anyway, that runs all the way round. Again, a little loop there of excess. One just by here, because these are going to be stud walls here that I've got to build, so I put them underneath there. Back round, through the joists. We're going up here. This hole here I've done already, and we've got some Wago connectors there, just temporarily connecting those cables together. And the only reason I cut those and didn't loop them up was simply because it was getting difficult to pull that length right the way through the joist. But I've left enough excess on there that I can run this to another socket, and I'm probably going to have a series of either 2 or 3 sockets on this wall, because I want a desk there eventually, so you're going to have things like maybe a computer, printers, whatever. Good idea to plan ahead like that. Then that goes back down across here, and then I had to connect this back into the other cable on the ring circuit, and I did this using the Wago connectors again and just placing them inside the Wago box. And then that is what they call a maintenance free connection, and that can be left under the floor. Although when I put my floorboards down, I think I'm probably going to mark like a square on it, and I might make like an easy accessible little hatch with some screws. I'll work something out, and it means if I ever have to lift the carpet up in the future, I can get access to things like this if I ever want to break into it. So basically by doing this, I've created one whole loop which comes up into the loft, all the way around the loft, back and back down into the downstairs power. I've got the power back on now. Again, I haven't put it back on this. I know this isn't good practice for the moment, but it's my house. No one else is coming in this loft bar me. I know how it is, so I just got to be careful I don't touch the live on the back of there. So I'm back again, and with the limited time I got, I'm just going to be doing an hour, maybe 2 hours at a push again today. And my plan today is just to wire up the junction boxes for the lighting circuits. I'm not going to connect the main feed into them, so they'll all be dead, but that way it's ready to go for when I plug the main feed in. And before I put the main feed in as well, I'm just going to connect up all the lights at some point. I'm going to buy the downlighters. I'm going to connect one downlighter to each one of the circuits just to make sure that they're turning on and off and everything's fine, test them and whatnot. One thing I like to do then is while I'm working in the loft, whether it be dark or not, if I'm doing things like putting screws down into the joists and that kind of thing, if you're ever in doubt, leave the lights on, leave your sockets on with a radio going, and that way if you put the screw through a cable, which hopefully shouldn't happen, the power will go off. And it gives you a quick indication as to which screw went through that cable and where your problem lies. Because the big problem is, you turn the power off, you're working away, you do all your floorboards for example, or you do all your plasterboard in the ceiling, you've got to turn it back on, you've got a problem. And then you think, well, where did that occur? And obviously, by doing it as you go along, if you whack a screw through and the power goes off, you know it's underneath there, so it sort of locates the problem for you and get in and have a look and rectify it before you go too far down the road with putting your floorboards down or your plasterboard. Unfortunately, from when I rewired the house a couple of years ago, I had loads of cable left in the shed, which is more or less perfect, but I did have to buy some lighting cable. I got this from Tool Station. It doesn't look or feel as flexible as the stuff I usually use, but I got the voucher, so I got about 10 quid off a spend in there, which made this a lot cheaper than going to say Screwfix or somewhere else. So we'll see what it's like. It doesn't seem as flat either. I'm not an electrician, so I don't know how electricians do this. But generally I like to leave a little bit of slack, and I need this for a light switch. This is going to be the landing cable, or one of them. But I have a switch up here, a switch downstairs, so I'm going to have to run the length of 3/4 earth back out of here and down to my downstairs landing. I've got to work out the height for the regs, and the maximum height for a light switch is 1.2 metres, so going on that basis, 1.2 is here. And there's always that question of by the time you turn it up, how much slack do you leave, you know? And you may move the switch, so sometimes it feels like you're wasting cable, but in reality, for the hassle of adding connectors later and all that, you're probably better off just leaving a little bit and snip it down. Then I keep all my spare cable, and then like over there, for example, where you're connecting junction boxes and you only need short lengths, well, you can try and use it up there. So that should be more than enough. So if I do need to eventually move it from one joist through to another, move it across, I got a little bit of slack then to give me the extra length. So now I've just got my measuring tape out, and this is where a bit of forward planning is important, because I just mark these lines here, here and here. Along here I'm going to have a stud wall. You're going to have your stairs there, landing here, and then you're going to have a door just below this Velux window, around by here. So I have to account for the opening of the doorway, and then you have to think which way is your door going to open. I know my door's going to open inwards this way, so it means then that my light switches are more likely to going to be on this side. That way, this cable has got to come up underneath where the stud wall's going to go, which is around by there, so that's perfect. And now based on this line, it's going to be probably somewhere within there. And then, again, I just need to lift this up, measure it with a tape, and make sure I got the 1.2 metres plus a little bit of surplus for pulling through the opening and doing your wiring and whatnot. Right, something I didn't explain, which most people probably know, is that for the lighting circuits I was obviously using 1.5mm squared twin and earth cable, and I'm going to use these Wago connectors, more so because I got a load of these available here. I could have used different ones. These are the 773s, and these just push in, and to release them you just sort of twist them and pull them back out again. You can see with those Wagos that if you cut them to the right length, and it actually tells you the length to cut it to on the box and on the back of this. In there you can actually see your copper sticking up through that clear bit, so that's quite nice because you know then that you've pushed it in properly, and you just want to make sure that the sheath around your wire is pushed up inside as well, so there's no copper exposed like that. This is the bit where all the electricians start to have a moan and say, oh, he's not using proper cutters, he's not a real electrician. Well, no, I'm not. And that's why I'm using these automatic trimmers, because for me they're a lot quicker. As you can see. The only thing with these push fits is you find that when you've got the earth sleeve, they're always hard to get in, because as you push you just tend to screw the sheath up like that. So just make sure that you get that copper sticking up to the end. This is where my little offcuts of cable I mentioned earlier come in handy, because effectively these are a bit like a ceiling rose in your house, these junction boxes. So rather than going from one room to the other, my feeds are just going from that box into that box. So I can cut this down now. I want it roughly, say that long, and this will just provide the power from one junction box to the next from the original feed that I brought in from the back bedroom. Taking a quick look at the board, we've got main feed there, which I haven't connected yet. That's going to go into there. Then from there we've got feed from there to there to there into all the junction boxes, and one back there which is going up through the ceiling and over to that cable right on the chimney breast at the back there, and that's that light that I want the switch over there for rather than over here. All the power goes down to the switches then, which all go down into the floor. I got another cable there, well, 3 cables which you saw me do earlier. They're all going to be up in a stud wall for the switches, and then from there, when the switch is turned on, the power comes back down into your junction box and then off through these cables to all the lights in the ceiling. And you can see those, I got different series of lights set up. I got some for the dormer over there, I got some for this little area here,
some over there for the corner, and obviously the ones on the landing as well, which I need, and they're going to be controlled from downstairs as well. The other thing to remember when you're obviously doing the lighting circuits like this is your landing circuits. I need a light switch downstairs as well. So what I'm going to do is wire the first switch up here in the stud wall, and then I'm going to run a length of 3 core and earth cable back down, because that only has to pop down there into the wall below. And as I've said previously, I'm just going to do it in trunking for now, straight down the wall, so I've got a switch, and then at a later date when I'm able to make a mess, I'm just going to chase around that trunking, rip the trunking off, bury the cable in the wall, and I'll plaster it back over. But I think trunking down the wall for now, although it looks a bit unsightly, it'll do the trick downstairs without making a mess while my family are living in it. Unfortunately, that's the end of my 2 hours. I've got to get back in now, but you can see there from a distance anyway, it all looks nice and neat now. I've got all the junction boxes easily accessible. I've got all my lighting cables in the floor ready to pop up through any stud work. Other than connecting this live feed and adding a few lights for now, it's more or less ready to go, so I'm happy now. I think the next step is to get some more floorboards and start to board the back of the loft. When I say the back of the loft, I just mean this area here, because what I'm thinking is if I can get some floorboards down over by the chimney and work my way back as far as I can, I've got a nice platform to store my tools or to stand on when we're fitting the stairs and things like that. Obviously I can't go around the area where I'm fitting the stairs, but I can come down the side where I'm stood now. And just get as much in as I can, because it means then you've got a nice working area instead of worrying about putting your feet through the floor. And obviously now I've done all the cables in the floor that I need, I don't need any access underneath at all, so I can sort of get on with that. Other than clipping a few cables here and there, I can do that as I go along. Then I can't think of any other reason why I need to go under the floor. Anyway, that's me done for today. Bye. If you enjoyed today's video, then please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, press the bell icon for regular notifications. I've been Pouse around the house. Ta-ta, farewell.